Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this.
So, how dare you think that you could write a book? I don't even know how you got that wild idea in your head. But that's what we're here to talk about today.
I think it has something to do with my coach.
So, guys, so the whole time she's going to try to praise me, I'm going to try to deflect the entire time. It's like the Matrix out here because she gets all the credit. So, tell people a little bit about your backstory, kind of that whole thing, and we'll kind of get started from there.
Yeah, I hate that question because when you're, I really do, because when you've lived over a half a century, you know, it's like, how do you condense it into 30 seconds?
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
And I really did think about this because I knew you were going to ask me. And you're like, who am I in a nutshell? Well, let's see. Since I started coaching with you, that was 14 months ago. And I know you're going to deflect it, but I'm going to say it anyway. In that 14 months, I have changed my career dramatically. I moved halfway across the country. I ramped up my podcast. I joined a 10-month-long coaching program. I wrote a book. I'm in the process of getting divorced. And I became anti-fragile. And you know what? I don't regret any of it, which is a big change from who I used to be. So I don't know.
Minimal stuff. Just a couple things.
Yeah. And I did a bulk of those actually all at the same time, which from what I realized that, or what people have told me, they're like, people just don't do that. And I'm like, well, I did. I didn't even think twice, move halfway across the country, quit your job and get divorced. I mean, like, it's like, what can I say? Oh, in the process of producing a book.
So before we get into the book, what do you think is the top lesson you learned about yourself in that time?
The top lesson? You mean through the whole coaching program? Oh,
no, just in general, as you sit today.
Yeah. I can do more than I think I can. I'm more resilient than I gave myself credit for.
And do you think, switching in a different seat now as you're writing this book for other people, is that kind of the message that you're hoping to get across with the book?
Yeah, it is. My main message is that you can change. If you don't think you can change, you can. And for the longest time, I thought I was stuck. And when I realized that it's really the story that I tell myself and my life is 100% my choice, that was a big game changer. But it's not like it happened overnight, and it's not like I remembered it right away. Like, some things happened overnight, and then other things, and we found this out coaching together. It was just some things you just had to tell me again and again and again, because for whatever reason, it didn't stick. It's not that it wasn't true. It's just that it didn't stick. And I think I learned that and it's true for other people that you meet too. It's not always a one and done. We think we should talk to people and they should remember exactly what we say the first time and be able to retain that information. And that's not always true. I mean, sometimes we need a reminder.
Here's a simple kind of explanation of that. So, like, when you need a drink of water, you go to the sink and you get a drink of water. When you drive home from work, you just drive home from work. You stop at the stop signs. Like, these behaviors and the beliefs that we have about ourselves are ingrained subconsciously. And everybody knows the stat, but 80%, 90% of what we do is based on your subconscious behaviors.
Sure.
And so the repetition is not a pattern that is easy to knock off. And so you have to keep hitting it. But what happens is that I think people create a self-awareness level. And then when you create the self-awareness, then you can fix it, right? Because not it's the same by any means. But the number one question that addicts ask me is when am I going to stop craving it? Like, that's the number one thing. And it's like, it's the same thing when you're trying to change who you are. Like, when is this damn change going to take place?
Yeah. Well,
I am done with this.
Yeah. Well, the one thing you said was self-awareness. I think that was the other biggest takeaway, or the biggest transformation for me, was becoming very, very self-aware to the things I was saying, to others, to what I was saying to myself, to my actions, down to even, it's funny, like even the food I was eating or the behaviors that I had, just as more of a, not to mention the word, not to say the word again, but this self awareness where it's like, wait a minute, it's not on autopilot. It takes a little bit more mental energy to think about what you're going to say before you say it. I still struggle with it sometimes, but now I pause, I slow down, and I tell myself, and I remember that my words are critical currency. My words do matter. How I perceive a situation or how I talk about a certain person does matter. And that was another, I mean, I had lots of big takeaways coaching with you. And then out of that, I did write the book. I had a lot of realizations through that. And, but the biggest one was that what I tell myself really matters. And it's not what other people think. It's what I think about myself, what I tell myself. And that was a big, big shift for me.
And when you embark on writing a book or telling your story, you have to be comfortable, I guess, for the most part, of revisiting maybe stories that you probably kept locked inside for quite a while.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. And how's that? I mean, how's that experience? Because I believe personally that everybody has a book in them, at least one, even if they don't sell it.
Yeah, I think so. The process of working through that was surprisingly cathartic. I was really surprised. And, going back to your coaching, I don't think the book would have been born if I didn't go through the coaching process and you didn't encourage me to write all the time. Like, I was just journaling so much every day, writing something, whether it was in physical form or whether it was typing it. And a lot of what I was writing and processing is what produced the book, So but as I went back to revisit some of those old stories, they hurt at first, but the process that we went through, the process that you showed me that I went through to interact with those stories actually wound up being more freeing than it was challenging or damaging or like scary. I don't know. I'm not sure the exact word to put towards it, but it was more freeing for me, like just to interact with very painful stories. They don't bother me anymore. I guess I should put it that way. There's a couple of them I really, really, really dug into, and there were a few of them actually nobody knew about. And to write about those, to interact with those stories actually allowed me to release them. And now they don't have the same hold over me that they used to.
And when what is your, journaling is something that everybody says they should do, but what is your advice to somebody that's maybe toyed around with it or can't get it right? Like, what's your advice to somebody?
Well, the one thing you said, you quote unquote can't get it right. There's no right or wrong way to journal. So I think that's really personal. If you don't have time to do it, I would say you have time. You just have to make it a priority and find it, even if it's 5 minutes a day, to sit and write something down on paper. Just because of all the things going on in my life right now, I don't journal as much as I would like, but I still have my journal out on my desk. And when I have 30 seconds to jot something down, I will jot something down. And you go in and out of seasons too. For those who are into journaling, they're like, I dropped it. I'm not journaling 30 minutes every day like I used to. It's a season, right? And it's getting those thoughts onto paper. So if you've never started before, I would say buy yourself something that makes you want to write in it, as opposed to getting something that you don't want to interact with, because journaling can become very, very personal. And it just depends on how you want to use it. I mean, I've done both. You and I shared a document that had to do with coaching, and, the typing was just as good for me as handwriting, although they say handwriting is far better. I mean, I guess it just depends on what you're using it for, but those stories are captured, they're preserved, they're sitting there. The nice thing about putting it, I guess, in the typed form is that you can lock it, you can hide it. If it's your own personal thing, nobody's going to find it. You think, depending.
I think Sue would say if you even just get started on sticky notes, right?
Sticky note. Oh yeah, we have a lot of those going on.
Yeah. So you know what I'm saying? I think that a lot of people, I think they judge, what it is or what it isn't, when it comes to working out or journaling or meditation or ice baths or all this
Oh my
stuff. And
God,
it's like,
stop comparing yourself to somebody else. That's what
yeah,
that is.
just do it.
Yeah, just do it. That's comparison. I mean, don't get stuck in the comparison trap.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she journals for 10 hours a day. I can't journal for that long. Well, who gives it? Like, who cares?
Because if you're not getting it out on paper, then it's going to be stuck in your head. And if it's stuck in your head, it's going to be stuck in your mind.
Yeah, and you make a good point there. When I started getting especially the harder stories out and putting them on paper and interacting with them, you're right, it got out of my mind. And that's a big, big deal to release that. You don't have to interact with it anymore in that capacity. So good point.
Is there a story, and I know I don't want you to give them all away. Is there a story or something that sticks out to you most out of the book?
Oh my gosh. I'm not quite sure what you're thinking. I know you read the book.
I'm not thinking anything. I'm thinking a story that works for you, that was something that was powerful to put down on paper. And you don't have to share the whole thing, but just something that comes to your mind.
Yeah, well, you know, yeah, I do. It was a story where the kids, I think it was in first or second grade, and the kids had pushed me off of this jungle gym thing. It must have been 6 feet above it felt like 6 feet. Maybe it was only 4 feet. Who knows? You know, I'm in first grade, 5 or 6 years old, right? So anything tall is 10 feet off the ground. But anyway, I get to the end of this. The kids had me sit on the end of this thing, and I was not your popular kid in school. So I have to set that picture too. I was the kid who was teased. I was the fat kid. I was the smart kid in the class. So I wasn't your popular kid, that's for sure. And I wanted to have a friend. So they were like, oh, hey, climb up here and sit on the edge of this jungle gym thing. And the next thing I know, all the kids are laughing and everybody's having a good time. Next thing I know, what I told myself for almost 50 years was that I was pushed off and that they were laughing and they thought that was funny to push me off. And I fell on the ground, and I still remember being unconscious. I still remember that incident very clearly. And I, for a long time, carried that story around, just like these kids pushed me off. They were mean to me. It set up my thought process that nobody likes me. And so it just went down the wrong road. Right. And so I carried that story for a long time. When I wrote it out and I interacted with it, and then I think, I don't remember, it was a coaching session. You said to me, you kind of like blew my mind and said, well, maybe if they really weren't laughing at you, maybe it was just something else. And I realized at that point was that, oh my God, I've been telling myself a story that may or may not be true for a long time. So I wrote I wrote a letter back to the kids saying, maybe you didn't really, push me off there. Maybe I carried this story around. And yeah, that's one of the more memorable stories out of my book. So lesson learned is that it's not what you think. It's not always what you think it is. That was the lesson learned.
I mean, anybody listening, like, that's 45 years, 42 years, guys. Like, it's not the first time I've heard it. I was at a workshop in Austin. Woman, similar story, not the same, but similar, 62 years old, like in full on tears from breaking through a story when she was 5 years old. Like, it's just, and it's because they're stored away and they're hidden. And, that's why journaling or working with somebody helps, because, you're going to allow it to remove from the head down to a piece of paper or just out of your mind. And it's going to, the freeing feeling of that is that weight is going to feel so much lighter.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
So you go out and you say, I'm going to write a book. And how did you, or maybe you don't, maybe you're still dealing with it. How do you combat, the million of people out there who want to start a podcast, want to post on social media, want to write a book? How did you push yourself through those doubts of knowing that you could launch a book? And it's coming, so we still got to get across the finish line, but it's like it's weeks away. So,
well, at the time of this recording, it is 2 weeks before the ebook is released. So, and then 4 weeks till but once the ebook is out, the paperback is close to follow. Pushing through the doubts. That's an interesting question. The podcast, both launching the podcast and the book. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I had a lot of doubts with it. It was more like, okay, if I launch this thing and I fail, what do I have to lose? So the podcast for me was a win-win regardless. I didn't feel like if it shut down, it was a failure. And if it kept going, it's like, hey, let's go see where this leads to. With the podcast, I mean, that's how we met. If it wasn't for the podcast, I wouldn't have known that you were a coach. I wouldn't have never met you. I wouldn't have met my podcast producer, Mark, who's your producer, who's amazing. I've gotten so many different perspectives. I've had great conversations. I've met a lot of people. So from the podcast, the doubt, I think I had more problem with, am I good enough to do this, rather than doubting it. And that was more or less in the beginning. And it was just a skill set issue. When I got over the fact that it's like, hey, you can improve every time you do something, then it wasn't that bad. With the book, doubt, yeah, sometimes I wondered whether or not it was going to get over the finish line because it was taking longer than I wanted it to. And then I realized that no, all things happen in perfect timing. So I started writing the book middle of January, right? And I think I was done by what, March? Yeah, I think so. Pretty much so. It was completely done. All, I think 14 chapters. The way that it's going through, it's about 170 pages when it comes out. And I went through a little bit. I doubted whether or not it was going to get over the finish line. And then I thought, well, I told myself, you know what? This book isn't for me. If I help one person, then it was worth it. Same thing with the podcast. I don't have a very large following for my podcast at the moment, but there are maybe 40 faithful people that listen. And if those 40 people are helped and they enjoy it, and every once in a while I get to get a text, it's like, hey, I love your podcast interview with so-and-so. It's like, then, okay, that makes it worth it for me. So I don't doubt that much anymore.
I mean, most of you know my story, so I'm not telling you anything new, but I didn't look at the listeners, like the downloads, for like almost 3+ years, and even when I did look, it was on accident because I had to fix something. And I was really mad that I looked. But
what was the number? Do you remember?
It was big, but that's not the point. The point is that when I got started, I met my producer and I said, look, don't, for the life of me, don't tell me, don't, like, that's not why I'm doing it. So like, I'll get caught up in the numbers. And one time I begged him to tell me, like 6 months. Like, I was like, dude, tell me, or like, you're going to get fired. And he's like, dude, whatever, you told me. He said, all I can tell you is that it's going up and to the right.
Yeah.
And, I wish we would judge our lives more on up and to the right. And when you put out content and you put out this book that you're putting out, like, I think it's so cool that somebody could pick it up 20 years from now and it could like change their life, or like they could pick up a podcast episode 20 years from now. Like, that's the point of content. Like, it's a vault of where you were. And what I find even more fun is like, you and I can do this interview now, and then we can do the interview in 2 years, and like to see where you are, where you came, like my friends that come on, like that's fun to me. And I think if more people took that tactic, they wouldn't get so stressed out when you're just putting stuff out, man.
Yeah. And you take a 40-year time horizon on it. I think that was the other thing that blew my mind. I really appreciated when you told me that the one time, because I live life with urgency, right? I got to get something done right now, and it has to be accomplished right now. And you said to me, well, why don't you just put it on a 40-year time horizon? And that was really freeing, to be honest. And I realized, oh, wait a minute, I can accomplish all those things I want to accomplish. I just don't have to do them right now in the next 6 months. I could take a little bit longer to do it.
So lay us out the book a little bit. Give us a brief overview, kind of explain what's the name, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. All the fun things that go with that. So the book is called Small Steps, Big Wins, after my podcast. And the gist of the book is that I walk through post-traumatic growth. And we hear a lot about trauma. We don't hear as much, I don't hear a whole lot about post-traumatic growth. And, trauma is an interesting word. It's an interesting experience. It means different things to different people. What I didn't realize was that trauma can actually be a positive thing. And I learned about post-traumatic growth from a couple different sources, but really basically what it is you have a series of events that happen to you that they have certain outcomes, right? And that out of your trauma that you had, positive things occur. So the second part of my book unpacks a number of situations and circumstances that I walked through that caused my own post-traumatic growth that's out of things that happened last year. So there are 5 different distinct areas for post-traumatic growth. One is personal strength. Another is appreciation for life. The third is relationship with others. The fourth is spiritual or existential changes. And the fifth is new possibilities. And all 5 of those have been documented. There's a couple guys, Tadici and Moore, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, about 30 years ago, did research on post-traumatic growth. So I wasn't making all this stuff up. I was basing a lot of what's in my book on research, other books that I've read, realizations that I had as I went through each of those circumstances. I'm not going to unpack them now, but I explain what I went through in each of those categories in the book, and then talk a little bit prior to that about, just a little bit of my background and story. And pretty much a lot of it has to do with my coaching interaction with you and how we've, things that you and I have talked about and how you've helped me really gain this amazing level of self-awareness that I never had before. So that's the simple answer, but there's more to it than that. And going through the process of story work, which is what you're also trained in and what you had helped me do, that process to interact with all of my stories. And that's also in the book outlined how you can use your stories using the process of story work to work through them. And then, I kind of dub my book an autobiographical self-help book. So, and then there's a couple chapters, one on regret. There's another on, what you tell yourself matters, destiny, and my story's not over. Neither is yours. So that's kind of the 30,000 foot look.
Since she's going to make me address my coaching, I guess I'll say a little something.
You better.
It's a wild, and just so we're clear, everybody, this is my message to everybody that's listening out there, like, get some help from somewhere, support, no matter who it is, whatever works for you, whether it's in the health space, the business space, the mindset space, the life space. It's helped me in my career immensely, get sober, get through my divorce. Like, my coach is my jewel as well too. And when you get to play part in people's lives and be so intimate, it's a very interesting responsibility that takes a lot of gravity. It's a lot of weight. But when you listed, like, even though I was a part of all those things, you listed off all the things that have happened in the last 14 months, and I was like, that's a lot. And so, like, it's so cool to play a hand in that. And so I'm so excited for you, for this book to come out. I'm so excited for you to continue to produce the podcast, and you just love connecting with people. And I think what I like the most about the book is it's relatable. It's very easy to consume. It's not going to be over anybody's head. Like, you can take something from every chapter, and it's true. I mean, I think that's the most important thing. It's a life that's been led, and I think people are going to get a lot from it. So I'm very excited. The Kindle comes out October 15th. When does the hardback come out?
October 29th.
October 29th. Okay.
Yeah.
And they can get it everywhere?
Yeah, it'll be everywhere.
Okay.
I mean, Amazon, but I think it's like they are gearing up to have it in the bookstores too.
Whoa, that's gonna be weird when you walk in and see that bad boy.
I know.
That's gonna be crazy.
I know. Yeah, that's gonna be a little.
If you're walking through an airport and you see it, like, you might have to miss the plane.
That's exactly where I pictured it. I even designed the cover to be one of those. Yeah, I'm gonna grab that on the way to my plane.
Oh my God! Could you
Small
imagine
steps,
sitting
big
down?
wins.
Could you imagine sitting down? Somebody sits next to you and pops open the book like that.
Well, my picture's on the back too.
Oh, that'd be Lose It Central right there.
Yeah, I know.
Be like, let me autograph, and they're like, no, I'm good, thanks. You're like, come on, let me autograph.
That really is me.
Yeah. So if people want to find the podcast, they want to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Yeah, well, it's Small Steps, Big Wins podcast, but I do have a website. It's www.suesaller.com. That's SUESALLER.com. And you can find me that way. And you can send me a note, reach out to me through there. I think that's the easiest. I am on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn too. I think it's Susan Saller, not Sue Saller, but That's me. I don't know. How else do I find me? I'm not on social media a whole lot, but I'm there. I'm searchable.
They gotcha. Guys, if you like this episode, send it to a friend. Go out and grab Sue's book, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me, and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Until next time, love yourself, then love others. Peace.